Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?
Well, hi again, everybody. This is Rob Godlewski with the Think Small podcast. And today our special guest is Mark Holland. Mark is the CEO of CoVerica Insurance and Risk Management. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today on the Think Small podcast.
Rob, glad to be here. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great one. So, as I know, you've been in the business for a very long time, for just about over 30 years, but you've only been with CoVerica a short time. So, let's talk about the beginnings first, right? How you got into this line of work and let's talk about some successes and quite honestly some not so successes as you've wound up here and finally here as the CEO of CoVerica.
To speak about finding CoVerica first, or speaking about, let's say, getting into self-employment first.
Well, let's talk about CoVerica first.
Okay,
So,
sure.
how'd you get here? Tell us about the business. What do you do for your clients and customers, and what problems you solve for them?
So historically, my background has been in the employee benefit space, and the things that we did that were differentiators. And I'm saying we, as in I've had multiple companies through the years that did variations of this. We grew up doing benefit communication and electronic enrollment, and so you can kind of think of that as when the employer decides what all they're going to offer the employees, somehow they have to tell the people about it and they have to capture the elections. And so they would outsource that to us, and we had many tools that did it. And we still do that today. It's just when I started doing that, we were very unique, one of the only ones. We grew up doing it in volume. But today there's lots of different options that companies that do it. And then I want to say it's probably a little over 5 years ago. If 10 years ago, I would have said my ideal client is the one we do everything except the healthcare. And the health
Okay.
in employee benefit world, the healthcare was just a different animal. Although I've done healthcare throughout most of the 30 years, just it's like your revenue goes up a little and your service requests go up a ton.
Hmm.
So, when you're targeting your ideal customer. So that being said, but about I guess it was 5, 8 years ago, I decided that if we're going to stay in the benefits business, we need to bring all the solutions to the table, because whoever gets the healthcare generally gets the rest of the stuff.
Hmm.
And with that being said, so then how do we do it well? And is there something I don't know? And I considered myself an expert at the time, but I started reading some books, diving in, getting involved in some of the associations to see, is there another layer of this I didn't know? And I was so blown away to learn what I learned about what the traditional agents think. Let's call it a group benefits agent that's done healthcare all their life. The way
Hmm.
traditional agents think on how the system operates is actually not correct. It's inaccurate. And so I was blown
Huh.
away to learn that, even skeptically, like, no way. And as I peeled
Huh.
back the onion more and more, so I did a good 5 years of research to learn. And even since then, I wrote a best-selling book about it. But it's essentially you have to understand the healthcare industry to then understand how the health insurance industry is dealing with it. And that being said, the traditional health insurance plans are not solving the problem, and they're not ever going to solve the problem with their business model. So guys like me learned how to do custom plans for the employer that could solve the problem. And it's just a whole different approach and mindset. But none of
Interesting.
which addresses your question about how I found Coverica, though.
That's okay. That's okay. It's an interesting journey, right?
But that was background. And so my firm, I was just an independent firm, small guy. We were reasonably profitable. And so how I found Coverica is leading up through COVID, we had a scenario where we liked doing larger clients. And when I say larger, several thousand employees.
Oh,
And that
okay.
being said, leading into COVID and then COVID, we lost seven of our top 10 revenue clients. So to put some
Oh,
math to
goodness.
that,
Yeah.
our revenue was about 1.8 when it started, and it went down to about 225 when it stopped.
Oh,
And
goodness.
through those losses, it was about a 30-month time frame it was almost like every other month something was happening, every quarter something was happening. And
Wow.
all of them but one were acquisitions. And then like we had a couple of them that we didn't lose, but they closed.
Oh.
COVID, they closed their doors.
So
And
that's not
so
anything to do with an economic cycle or changes in policy or anything like that. It's just
it,
that's dumb luck.
And I'll tell you, through the years, I've had plenty of my clients like get acquired, as I've had some of my clients do the acquiring. And
Sure.
generally, all through my career, we would lose one, gain one. And oftentimes, even when we would lose one to an acquisition, sometimes we would be able to pick up the new mother company that that bought them once we showed them what we did. And through this time frame, that 30-month period, I couldn't even get the acquiring companies to talk to me. And I was really kind of taken
Oh,
aback by,
wow.
I've never seen it like that. So it kind of gave me question. I'm a big person with my faith, and it kind of gave me question over, God, is this what you want me to do? Or are you trying to drive me somewhere else?
Hmm.
And so that's essentially what led me to CoVerica was, I mean, literally in a prayer, I had just read an approach from a recruiter on LinkedIn, and that approach, it was, the generic things from being a business owner. We get approached all the time about, do you want to sell your company and all that, and um,
Sure.
and it was really just a thing in prayer that God sparked me to talk to that guy. He said, how would I know if I'm not listening? Was what he told me when I was praying about, are you trying to push me somewhere else?
Hmm.
So I talked to him, and at the time I actually felt like it was more of a personal thing. It wasn't about a job. I wasn't
Right.
even interested. And the gist of that was CoVerica is a Christian owned company, or our founder was a Christian owned. We're actually all of our employees are shareholders, so we're employee owned, but founded on biblical
As an
principles.
ESOP, is that correct?
We actually chose, or I guess they chose, because it was done before I got here, a structure to do it under a
Oh, okay.
corporate structure versus an ESOP. But
I gotcha.
I would say it functionality wise, it's just a different method to do this a
Yeah,
similar thing.
regardless, every employee has some ownership in the business.
Yeah, and then they earn more with bonuses and time tenure and that type thing.
Sure.
And so that's essentially what led me here, was because of the Christian values and foundation of this company, and the real specific thing that happened about God pretty much telling me to talk with him.
Hmm.
Um, and there were several other things that confirmed, let's say, I felt like God was talking to me through others, like my wife, because it also fueled us moving to Texas, which I had no interest in moving, no interest in selling my business, and no
And where were
interest
you
in.
before?
I was in Tennessee,
Okay.
so
Okay.
just outside the Memphis area in a city called Germantown.
Okay.
And so that got us here, and we ended up moving the whole family. I ended up selling the business to Goverica and then coming aboard to drive the ship here. And another interesting thing is Coverica was primarily commercial property casualty and individual property casualty. So from an insurance perspective, it wasn't even my niche.
Okay.
But I love the fact that our founder, Mike Sterlacy, one of the things that he had said to his let's say the hiring group, as they were debating, the how can he help us, and is he the right fit, and what expertise. And Mike had said, if we hire somebody with P&C, we already got everybody here already knows that.
That's
we're
that's
hiring
very
we're
true.
hiring a expertise that we don't have, and relationships that we don't have, because we already have the P&C relationships.
Yeah, yeah. So, Mark, what I really like to ask my guests on this podcast is, hey, tell me about a time you managed a business through a period of contraction or down sales. And you just explained that story. And but what you were able to do was kind of find a safe landing place for your business as it was going through that really drastic period of reduced revenue. And you found a very safe place, right? You were able to sell the business to CoVerica, take on the leadership role at CoVerica, and it sounds like a very symbiotic relationship. So that's the That's the best answer I could have hoped for to that question.
And for me, it wasn't really looking for a sale or a landing as much as it was just looking to be in God's will. And
Right.
through my time, just in business and life, I've had plenty of situations, both highs and lows, that I can see God's work. And I would just say, from a encouragement, if somebody's going through a hard time, is that sometimes God closes doors to push you somewhere where you wouldn't have gone. And so
Hmm.
you got to try to get out of the mindset of, woe is me, my life's falling apart, and more like, what should I learn in this season? And because the Bible tells us that, it doesn't say we might have trouble. It says you will, in this life, you will have trouble.
Right. When we talked before, you have a very interesting story earlier in your career of transitioning one of the businesses that you founded. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because what you thought was going to be a very successful exit turned out not to be so much. Dig into that if you will.
Yeah, so kind of the one of the biggest successes, I think we were talking at the time about a ramp up period, when
Right.
business was exploding. And so the company I had at the time was Bencom, and I was a partner in that company with two others initially. Then we bought the other guy out, so it was just two. So three of us initially, and we then it was two of us, but
Okay.
two of us through the main big ramp up period. And so we grew that thing to where we had five locations around the country, and we had about 3,000 commercial company clients. And I mean, things were really going. And so,
Also in
it,
the insurance space, right?
correct, correct.
Yeah, okay.
And a big focus there was benefit communication, electronic enrollment. So with that, my partner and I were kind of grew apart relative to our faith and our beliefs. So let's just call it your core beliefs um, that you make decisions by. And,
Sure.
and so that being said, it made at a 50-50 partnership, decisions sometimes were difficult or a battle. And so with that, I felt like I needed to get out one way or the other. So we started dialogue over, you buy me out or I buy you out. Either way, and it was probably a good couple of years that we went through that was just very frustrating because again, we were dealing with
Mm.
explosive growth, but yet then we're not, let's say, collaboratively working great together, and even difficult on the staff, et cetera. So he one day he comes to me and says, "Here's the number," and so I said,
To
"I'll
buy
let you
him
know."
out, you mean?
For him to buy me out.
Right.
And
Oh, okay.
he actually came to me and said, "How about you buy me out for X, or I'll buy you out for Y, whichever way you want to do it." And
Huh.
so I said, "I'll get back to you in the morning." And so we prayed about it, cut a deal. I thought that was an answer to prayer, that it was an exit that I needed. I had been working myself in a way that, 18-hour days, and just
Mm.
often 6, 7 days a week, just all the time, and handling that ramp up stuff. And so I was 41 at the time. The number was going to be enough I could retire. My payout was only a 60-day first payment and another 60-day second payment, and that was it. So it wasn't like I
Wow.
was financing it for 10 years. And
Right.
so my wife and I pretty much said, we're done. We'll just retire, or I was going to spend the rest of my time, working with charities and stuff like that. But
Sure.
anyhow, essentially, unlike I never would have predicted, the decisions that started after we got our deal done, I never got paid anything. And in the course of the next 4 to 6 months, he effectively destroyed the company. I
Oh my
would not
gosh.
have believed it could have been done at that pace, where expenses tripled and revenue cut in half in 6 months.
Oh my goodness, Mark. That's a terrible story. You successfully sold the business but never got paid.
So that was a
And you
tough
couldn't
one.
even go back you couldn't even go back to the business and, take it off of the trash heap. It was done.
That's correct. And it was done
Oh
at a
my
pace that
gosh.
I would not have believed possible.
It sounds like, yeah. So how did you pick yourself up and change course?
So part of it was I had to go through a period of time, because in that purchase agreement that I didn't get a check for, it included me non-compete, right? So
Mm,
part of you wants to just go start something else and pick it up, but I couldn't. for and
You had
and
the,
boy,
but you had to honor the non-compete even though they didn't
well,
successfully, finish their part of the bargain or the
um,
transaction, I mean.
I mean, so there's certainly an argument to be made that that's voiding the contract, but you still get into
I
lawsuits,
know. Yeah.
like, so, and
I
for
like
that
to say,
matter,
is the juice worth the squeeze?
right? So it was a very difficult year just having to let that take its course on figuring out,
Yeah.
what do you do? So eventually I just ended up starting another company. And
Mm,
part of that I did file suit, and through that and through the courts, we mutually agreed to mutually waive our non-competes um,
okay.
while we were going through the litigation piece of it. And so then that opened the door that, okay, now I can go back to work, if you will. But
Sure.
then it was, boy, starting from nothing when you went from this ramp up was, you know, I guess you might say challenging.
Oh my
But
gosh.
we did it, and I had lots of good relationships from the past that they knew where my character was, they knew where my abilities were. So then it was just a matter of figuring out how to get started again. And I'll tell you on a positive note, anybody who's been in a business and grown it for a while, I got to say, boy, if I could start all over again, what would I do different? And so even from just what kind of how you structure your networks and whatnot, it's
Sure.
of course technology had changed, but when you're in an established business, as technology evolves, it's like hard to change your current system versus now with what I could start a brand new system with no baggage.
Right, right. No, I've gone through lots of IT, transformations in my career, and I hear you. Starting with something already in place is much more difficult than starting from scratch.
Yeah, so I had the knowledge, but I didn't have people or a big block of business that we had to change anything.
Right, right. So so let's now flip back to CoVerica itself, right? The business was really founded more on the commercial property and casualty environment, correct? And
Correct.
when they acquired you and your former business, now you bring in skill sets for personal and employee insurance.
Yeah,
So
employee
it's
benefits. So
employee benefits. So it sounds like a pretty
every
symbiotic relationship.
yeah, every commercial customer that we have, they're getting their employee benefits from somewhere.
That's right. And you've got a built-in um, addressable market you can kind of attack for that business.
Yeah, and I guess the same thing goes the opposite way for every employee benefit client that we have a commercial outlet for. And the big firms have kind of figured that out. Like there's been a over the last 15 years a lot of M&A in the insurance agency space where like banks and private equity were buying insurance firms and
Hmm.
doing just that, buying ones that specialized in pieces of the industry, putting them together, trying to cross market. I don't know of any that did it well. As a matter of fact, I would even say if I asked all the people I know that have sold their firms, are you glad you did it? I don't think I've had anybody say yes.
Interesting. Okay.
Now that being said, that's asking people that sold to either a big bank or a private equity type deal.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like with this kind of new relationship of expertise areas, it sounds like you might be in a period of growth and expansion right now. Is that right?
We are. So we are internally, learning to work together. And because a lot of the benefit expertise was me and one other, we had to um, build a little more bench strength to grow it to the volume we need to. So
Okay.
this year we've acquired three firms, and one of which was a employee benefits firm. And that was specifically with the right skill sets to grow the benefits vertical the way we want to.
Interesting. So you're going through a period of hopefully rapid growth, if not, definitely growth. How are you managing the business through that relative to, operationally and from an employee standpoint? Sounds like you've got a really engaged employee base and they're all certainly committed to the cause. how are you navigating the business through this period?
Well, I'll say it's always a challenge, but dealing with people's a challenge because we're all different, and the way that we
Yeah,
think and how we receive information. So you got to have a good leadership team, and so we meet regular. I don't know if you're familiar with EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System.
I'm actually very familiar with it, Mark. Yeah,
So we operate here on a EOS platform, and so
great.
we're doing lots of integration, and so it's you got to change minds and hearts on the way we've always done it, and and then you got to it's really the same fundamentals that works in any business. So which is why I think once you've had several businesses like I have, it almost doesn't matter what the business does. You can come in
Hmm.
and let's say lead it. Certainly, internal expertise or very specific stuff can it can help, but yet again, we already have that in the agency. It's just as a leader, you've got to learn to use your resources and figure out what's working, what's not, and how can we be more efficient and change. Again, changing hearts and minds. That's probably the hardest one.
Yeah, yeah. But using a systematic process to lead the business through that's focused on relevant and achievable goals is a very important step in leading a business. I've worked with lots of business in my career that maybe had a kind of a loosey-goosey approach to managing the business. Kind of the leader would walk in the office in the morning and say, "What are we going to sell today?" And that's not exactly the way to sustainably and repeatably, build a growth engine. So I, I,
You
I
know,
am I am intrigued by your running on a very specific, management process, but that's the way to get it done. And it might sound boring, but that's the way it's done.
I would say it's critical, but I'll tell you from being in the employee benefit business, I've learned, I've worked with leadership of thousands of companies. And it actually surprises me how many do just what you said are in that loosey
Hmm.
goosey. There's some structure at some levels, but the thing EOS does, and I'm not an EOS sales guy or anything, so it's got no
Sure.
dog in that hunt. Is it just gives you a platform to follow that you can get everybody on let's say aligned interest from the top to the
Right.
bottom. And,
Right.
and so it's really almost like a roadmap, if you will, that can apply to just about any business.
Right. Right. That's great. That's great. So, Mark, tell me, what does the future hold for CoVerica? What does the next, say, 3 to 5 years look like in your business, in your industry?
So we want to keep on, we want to diversify more. And for us, diversification, so when you do like personal lines, property casualty, or commercial property casualty, or employee benefits, each one of those. So the market dynamics can change in a way that it changes a significant piece of your business if that's all of your business. And so we want to keep that where we're diversified from each one of those three verticals. We want to learn, or let me say learn, continue to master how we can cross sell amongst every time any of the verticals make a sale, that it's a prospect for the other verticals.
Got
Uh,
it.
and, because that essentially reduces your customer acquisition cost. And of course, the more product lines you have in with a customer, they're going to stay longer, and that essentially creates more profit based on more revenue per customer. Um, so how do we do that? We are also doing some stuff with AI. So we want to continue to learn how to sell in the marketplace, but with our systems, a lot of what we do, it's 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 a certain level of expertise. It's labor intensive, but we want to use AI to help take that stuff off our plate so our people can spend more time interacting with the customer. So ideally, today a service rep might do a task that would take an hour, and we think that really 95% of that can probably be AI doing it, but we still want to keep the person talking with the client. We
Hmm.
just want the AI to do the legwork of what I'll tell you, just to give you a simple example, is if we're
Sure.
placing insurance from one carrier to the other, there's a lot of details in the insurance policy, and you want to make sure, even if you've asked the new carrier to quote a certain thing before you give your customer the policy and they sign off, you want to make sure they actually put in the policy what they agreed to and that
Of
there's no
course.
gaps from the old. And once that's something you can teach AI to do. And so what could take 1, 2, 3 hours, depending on the complexity of the contract, something AI can do in a couple of minutes.
Hmm.
But of course, today we've got AI doing it plus a human checking it, and so you almost have to do both to find the gaps, et cetera. But that'll be real quick to where AI can do that, amongst many other things that are just labor intensive, manual, but manual and it needs a super level of expertise. But again, it's stuff that we can teach AI. And so that's a big piece that'll help us so we can use our people to do more people facing things and use the tech to minimize the legwork they have to do, behind the scenes.
Right. So it sounds like you're not necessarily looking at AI as a headcount reduction tool, but more of a tool to improve productivity, improve efficiency, and actually upskill the talent within your organization. Is that right?
That's right. So if we were trying to stay stagnant on size, we could use it as a staff reduction tool. But that we're expecting growth, and so in that case,
Sure.
we think we can grow and let the tech handle the growth to where, let's say, we're double the size with the same staff.
Mark, I asked that question as kind of a leading question because I will tell you, it has not ceased to amaze me that every CEO I get to speak to on this Think Small podcast says the same thing you just did. They're not looking at AI to reduce headcount. They're embracing it. They're looking at to make their people smarter and to give them more time to be human with their customers and clients. And I'm sorry, Mark, you're not the first person to say that, but I'm actually thrilled that you're not the first person to say that. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
it's
same
it's
same here.
very it's very invigorating and encouraging.
I don't see AI replacing people. There's just I mean, it can't with everything that we do and think. Now, I mean, there's AI can replace people-driven tasks in certain situations.
Yes. It's funny. One of my guests actually said, Rob, AI is not going to displace our people. People that know AI are going to displace our people.
I totally agree with that, and I'll tell you, I read an article even recently that was the gist of it was they were citing that with all of the explosion of AI that we've seen, it has not taken as many jobs as expected.
Right.
There'll be some isolated sectors that it'll affect more than others. But I don't. I think as a global marketplace, we're not going to see it eliminate everybody.
Right. Right. It's not going to be a world of robots running the world, you know. So, well, that's fantastic, right? Big growth, big upskill in talent, a real interactive agency that offers multiple service lines, not just one or two. Sounds like the world is your oyster right now, Mark.
And additionally, with that, we're going to do some acquisitions and strategic acquisitions to even do more outside of Texas.
Interesting. So,
And
so really to
and what
expand on a geographic basis or a service line perspective?
both.
Okay.
And but the geography in the insurance business is impactful because most all insurance is regulated at the state level. And so when an
Oh,
insurance company, let's say if they have like with California recently when we had the wildfires. So all of a sudden, all the major property casualty companies wanted to pull out or adjust their rates significantly. And so a threat for us is having too big of a block in Texas, and whether it's a Texas legislature thing, which I would predict it wouldn't be, or a some type of natural disaster thing where the carriers decide we're not going to write in Texas anymore. And so
right.
those are kind of threats. And so we feel like as we diversify our product lines, which we have done, and we write a good bit of business today outside of Texas, but we just want to do that a little more and diversify into a few states that will help us. I mean, we actually see ourselves being a fairly good regional player a lot more, just again for the stability, if you will, of the market.
That makes sense, especially if insurance is really regulated on a state basis. You want to be able to mitigate the risk you have for whatever reason in any given state. That makes a ton of sense. Well, Mark, your career really has seen a lot of challenging ups and downs and successes and periods of not so successful times, but what kind of advice would you give a leader of a small to mid-sized business as they're navigating their business through these times?
Well, my first one is going to be back to faith. I would encourage you with your faith and to find balance in life, because I'll tell you, God built us in a way that we maintain balance. And when my first agency, I told you I was working the 18-hour days. My second run at it with my new agency, that I was making just as much money and working almost casually.
Hmm.
And it's a matter of you got to have balance in your life with what you do with your spiritual life, your family, and what I think God taught me in the transition from the first one to the second one was just this. You were so focused, you meaning me, was so focused on the finish line of let's grow it real fast, get out and retire, that you missed the journey on the stuff that happens day to day where you can impact people. And so
Yeah.
my advice would be get an accountability group, get in a peer group, and it would be learn to maintain balance in life. You've got to continue being a parent to your kids, being the husband and date your wife or husband in um, whatever sex you are. And then I'd say keep your spirituality there as well. I spend personal quiet time with God every day, and I have
Hmm.
for over 10 years.
Excellent. Well, Mark, this has been such a great conversation. I know it's going to really resonate with our podcast audience. So thank you for your time. Mark Holland, the CEO of CoVerica Insurance and Risk Management. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Think Small podcast.
Thanks, Rob. Enjoyed it and look forward to talking with you at some other time.
Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?